We learned just moments ago, according to a source, that the FBI conducted a court-authorized search at the home of John Bolton as part of a national security investigation.
The knock on the Bethesda door came at dawn, the kind of hour federal agents prefer because it reduces surprises. And as policing experts will tell you, because early light and still streets make complicated operations safer for everyone involved. On August 22nd, 2025, those agents fanned out across the quiet Maryland neighborhood and into downtown Washington, where a second team arrived at a K Street office. Both locations belonged to John R. Bolton, the mustachioed former national security advisor and lifelong hawk who has stridden across Washington's foreign policy stage for decades. By mid-morning, cameras were clustered on the sidewalk and black evidence bags were being carried to waiting vehicles. The FBI had searched Bolton's home and office, part of a federal probe into whether he mishandled classified material. He was not arrested. The visual was unmistakable. A one-time insider whose long government career had stretched from the Reagan era to the Trump White House, now at the center of an investigation that touches national security, political grievance, and the perennial Washington argument about what counts as classified and who should decide. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. As the dust from the search settled, the public got something rare and revealing, a heavily redacted affidavit that laid out the government's probable cause for the search warrants. The document, released by order of a federal judge despite ongoing investigative sensitivities, says agents believed Bolton's home contained illegally retained classified and national defense information. Even with entire pages blacked out, the affidavit provided a skeletal narrative of how investigators had arrived at that conclusion, and why they were concerned that sensitive records might still be in Bolton's possession. One detail jumped off the page. The affidavit included a section, 10 pages long in one outlet's description, about a foreign entity hack of a personal email account associated with Bolton. Though the names and technical specifics remained sealed, the gist was stark. A trove of communications linked to Bolton had ended up with a foreign intelligence service, and within that trove were messages that, investigators believed, should never have been sent outside secure government channels. That allegation, if borne out, doesn't just speak to bad paperwork. It describes a potential counterintelligence risk, the movement of sensitive information from protected systems to a personal account, and then, via intrusion, into the hands of a foreign actor. It was this pathway, the affidavit suggested, that helped build probable cause for the search in Maryland and Washington. The seeds of this clash were planted years earlier. Bolton's 2020 memoir, a bristling account of his 17 months in the West Wing, had infuriated the White House and touched off a noisy fight over pre-publication review, redactions, and whether he had disclosed classified material. That fight produced lawsuits and headlines, and according to the newly surfaced filings, set off internal alarms about what other records he might have kept. An official tasked with reviewing the manuscript flagged areas that, in her view, implicated top-secret content. The affidavit, as summarized by news organizations, ties those concerns to the more recent questions about what agents suspected might still be in Bolton's home. The most concrete glimpse at what agents found came later, when a list of seized items emerged in court records. Investigators took iPhones, USB drives, folders, and other electronic media, the sort of grab bag you would expect if the government's theory is that sensitive material migrated across devices over time. Those inventories don't prove the presence of classified documents on their own, of course. Devices are often sequestered so specialists can image them and look for traces of data, deleted files, or cloud syncs. But they do show the scope of evidence the FBI thought relevant to the case. If you zoom out, the Bolton probe sits at the intersection of two long-running Washington dramas. One is a real and recurring national security problem. Senior officials who leave government with notes, memos, or briefing materials that they shouldn't, and the messy process of deciding what is classified versus what is merely sensitive, deliberative, or politically embarrassing. The other is the weaponization debate, a dueling set of narratives about whether federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies are applying standards evenly or wielding them selectively against political opponents. That second narrative roared to the fore almost immediately. Commentators on both left and right, many of whom already had strong feelings about Bolton, saw what they expected to see. Some insisted the search confirmed an administration-wide crackdown on figures who had publicly broken with the president in recent years. Others said the opposite, that the Bolton raid proved that no one is above the law, and that a former insider with robust media relationships would be treated just like anyone else suspected of mishandling handling secrets. Coverage noted with a critical eye that several federal inquiries had touched people listed in an appendix to a 2023 book by Kash Patel, by then serving as FBI director, raising pointed questions about whether enforcement priorities overlapped uncomfortably with political grievance. Federal officials, for their part, said the cases were driven by facts, not lists. Set aside the politics for a moment, and the mechanics still matter. Why conduct a search at dawn? Former federal prosecutors and agents almost always give the same answers: operational control, the element of surprise, and a reduced chance that evidence can be moved or destroyed. Early morning operations also mean more people are home and fewer are commuting through the area, which helps manage safety and logistics. Whatever else is happening in the head-spinning national debate, a search like the one on August 22nd followed the familiar tactical playbook. The affidavit's hints about the foreign entity hack deserve attention beyond their headline shock value. If, as reported, a foreign service obtained copies of personal account emails that discussed government business, investigators would be obliged to ask a series of uncomfortable questions. Which service got them, and how? Did the actors exploit the account directly or intercept the traffic upstream? Could the compromise give adversaries leverage or allow them to reconstruct sensitive decision-making in real time? Were any family members, whose devices might be far less hardened than those inside the White House, brought into conversations that touched on classified programs? Each thread would need pulling by counterintelligence specialists who understand sources and methods, and each answer would shape how aggressively the Justice Department pursued potential charges. Understanding Bolton's particular exposure also requires remembering the other security storyline that has followed him: the 2022 Justice Department case alleging that an Iranian operative plotted to assassinate him on U.S. soil. Retaliation, prosecutors said, for the American strike that killed Qasem Soleimani. The chilling allegation prompted unusual public warnings and a State Department-authorized protective detail. The episode underscored how often former national security principals remain targets long after they leave office. Against that backdrop, the notion that an adversary spy service held a cache of Bolton's emails, even if many were mundane, would have been especially alarming to counterintelligence officials who already view him as a person of high interest to hostile services. What exactly the FBI and Justice Department believe Bolton did wrong is still being assembled in public through fragments. Media accounts say the core inquiry focuses on whether he retained or transmitted classified material outside secure channels, including, potentially, sending sensitive content to family members via a personal email account while he was National Security Advisor and after. The warrant applications folded in contextual pieces from the book dispute and from contacts between Bolton and National Security Council reviewers who flagged sensitive passages. But important caveats are everywhere. Despite striking visuals from the search and stark language in the affidavit about national defense information, Bolton has not been charged with any crime, and his attorneys have insisted the government is misreading both his conduct and the nature of the materials at issue. The counter-argument from Bolton's camp, as reported by outlets that have seen their statements, hinges on a premise that resonates in Washington. Men and women who spend decades in government accumulate meeting notes, personal calendars, talking points, and drafts. They argue that these typical artifacts of public service are often overclassified in ways that can become fodder for political fights later. And in Bolton's case, they say, the government has repeatedly conflated vigorous policy debate and legitimate note-taking with wrongdoing. First during the memoir battle and now in the search warrant filing. His lawyers cast the latest inquiry as built on innuendo and an expansive definition of classified that would criminalize ordinary habits of senior officials. It is precisely that gray area where bureaucratic practice, secrecy rules, and political advantage blur that makes these cases so explosive. Classified, after all, is not a platonic ideal. It is an executive branch label affixed to information that, if revealed, could damage national security. The label can be applied too liberally, sometimes to protect deliberations or avoid embarrassment, but it can also be applied too sparingly, especially in fast-moving crises when officials are under pressure. When a dispute over those labels spills into court, prosecutors point to the statutes, the Espionage Act for National Defense Information, federal laws covering removal and retention of government records, false statements, obstruction. Defense lawyers, in turn, emphasize selective enforcement and inconsistent markings, arguing that their clients operated in common practice, not criminal intent. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on John Bolton's situation with the FBI? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.